Welcome to Against the Current, a podcast created to give public and private sector leaders, both current and emerging, as well as advocates and cultural voices, a platform to share their perspectives with candor and conviction. Each episode goes beyond talking points to uncover the real stories, challenges, and lessons shaping today's most important causes. These conversations connect directly to decision makers, donors, and supporters who want to understand not just what an organization does, but why it matters. You'll hear how faith guides leadership, how conviction drives action, and how bold ideas are shaping the future of freedom and culture, both here at home and around the world. Here is your host, Matt Waters.
Hi, I'm Matt Waters. You're with Aaron Siri, the world-class attorney who is taking on the vaccine administrative state bureaucracy, big pharma, and who am I leaving out, Aaron?
Anybody who wants to take away your rights.
There we go. That's great. Well, Aaron, thank you for joining me. You are the guy who has single-handedly, in some ways, I think this is probably a true statement, sued the government more than any attorney I'm aware of, and actually won. And that's that's saying something, because in conservative circles, we, have a lot of us want to push back on the government, but it's often said that you can't beat the government. You can't sue the government. It's impossible. But you're defying all the odds and doing it. So how are you doing it?
Well, first of all, that's quite a claim. First of all, I would definitely say not single-handedly. I have over 100 people in my law firm, incredible team. And there's no way I could handle the volume of cases and the amount of pushback we give to the government all on my own. I mean, as you and I sit here and talk, we've got over 100 lawsuits against the federal government and various federal agencies. Couldn't do that by myself. I don't think any one person could. In terms of pushing back when it comes to mandated medicine, those who want to take away your civil and individual rights to choose whether or not you want to get an injection in your body, take a drug, ingest something, wear some kind of face diaper like a mask on your face, what you wear, what you ingest, what you inject, that is where we might have done more lawsuits than anybody else out there on that topic. I've never done a tally, but that is certainly at the heartland of the policy work we do. And we're, I love doing that work.
Yeah, I know you do. This is your call, and you're doing what you appear to enjoy doing quite a bit. And it's even ideological, right? It's not that you're like a hired gun to, like I guess many and fundraisers or attorneys or whatever, but you're doing what you love. This is a real passion. It's a belief of yours. Before we get there, I should back up and ask you to tell folks who are watching this, who is Aaron Siri?
It matters who you ask. I mean, it really, matters who you ask. Ask the people I sue. I don't think they'll have some nice things to say. But I mean, just generally, you pointed out I'm an attorney, right? I went to Berkeley for law school. I clerked for a year at the Supreme Court of Israel for the chief judge. And then for about 6 years, I worked at one of the biggest firms in the country doing commercial litigation, representing, massive corporations and their financial interests. And then started my own firm well over a decade ago at this point. Initially doing some commercial lit, but then started doing more plaintiff side work that would be for the benefit of individuals, and started doing vaccine work, and have done more and more of that. That population of individuals are in need of protections as much as any other group. In fact, maybe more so. You're not going to hear people today on TV saying, hey, that minority group, that religious group, kick them out of school. You're not going to hear that. But you're going to hear that about people that don't vaccinate who make that choice. You're not going to hear people say, oh, that minority group, that religious group, don't treat them in the emergency room. But you're going to hear that about people who don't choose not to vaccinate for one or more reasons. Go down the list. Throw them out of their jobs. You say horrible things about they're selfish, they're horrible. I mean, this population of individuals needs more protection than anybody else. You said something about, I have an ideological view on this. I certainly do. And, my firm, as the ideological position we take really is that anybody who wants to get these products should be free to do it. That's America. That's freedom. Get as many as you want. every day, all day long, right? But nobody should ever be coerced to receive them under penalty of X, right? That's what informed consent is. You inform the person, they choose to consent. If they say no, that should be the end of the story. It shouldn't be, well, since you don't consent, now no school, no work, no civil rights. That's not informed consent. That's bullying, thuggery, tyranny. That's the exact opposite of civil individual rights. So anyways, that's my background. And, that's and how I ended up doing the work I've been doing now for over a decade in the area of vaccine, mandated medicine, and informed consent.
What was the catalyst, Aaron, for you to get into particularly the vaccine piece? You talked about commercial stuff. I mean, what was it? Was it personal for you? Tell people that story. I mean, how did you get to becoming really the foremost attorney defending individuals and their informed consent, ability to have informed consent, and to litigate against those who throw them out for exercising their informed consent, from the government to school districts to state law, that sort of thing. How did you get there?
I mean, I think I kind of just gave you the crux of it in many ways, which is that there really is no group you could treat the way they treat this group. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was so there were some measles cases in Brooklyn, and the New York City Department of Health decided that they made it literally illegal to not get an MMR vaccine if you lived in certain areas of Brooklyn. So literally, if you stayed in your house and did nothing, you just sat in your house, you were violating the law. Like just existing as God created you in your apartment by yourself. Okay, incredible, incredible. Listen, anybody who wants to get an MMR vaccine, go get it. Go get 2, go get 4, go get 5, get as many as you want. But anybody free country. But if anybody had an issue, for example, every single vial of MMR vaccine, every single one has literally billions of pieces of human DNA from the cultured cell of an aborted fetus. It's just a fact. And so some people find that objectionable. They don't want to take the product. They shouldn't have to. There are other issues, but let's leave it at that. So ICANN, the Informed Consent Action Network, amazing nonprofit, as you know, they've supported us defending anybody who got a violation for that. And let me tell you, the New York City Department of Health, they were vicious. They would go to people's apartment buildings, bang on their doors, try to publicly shame them. I mean, and so we got contacted by hundreds and hundreds of individuals. And we got almost every one of those dismissed before we even got to the hearing. All technicalities. You served it too late. You served it too early. You served it on holiday. You served it, with the wrong, you filled out the information wrong. The paperwork was, you name it, whatever it is. But there was about a dozen or two we had to go to trial on, basically a hearing. At the hearing, the attorney defending the New York City Department of Health was their general counsel. During one of the breaks, very nice guy. He would go into the hallway, right? This is going back 7, 8 years ago. He goes, look, I don't get it. He goes, I don't understand what you're doing here. He's like, you went to Berkeley, you clerked, you worked for Latham, you got your own practice. I could see you even represent big corporate. Like, what are you doing? And I said to him what I said to you. I said, listen to even how you folks treat these people. Think about it. And who are they? Who are these folks who choose not to vaccinate? They're just randomly waking up one day and they're like, hey, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm just not going to get vaccines. No, who does that? It's like, people don't just randomly wake up and decide to take a socially ostracizing position that's going to get them called names, get their kids kicked out of school, and so forth. There's incredible social pressure to vaccinate. Okay. So it takes something significant to not do it. And oftentimes these are folks who they or their children have had a very personal experience with these products. That alone, by the way, that negative experience is usually not enough, I find. It's that plus they then researched it. So they now also have a base of knowledge to fill in their experience, where they look at the clinical trials relied upon. They look at the post-licensure safety. They look at some other stuff. And so they come to this, learned decision. Most people that don't, I would say the average person who chooses to get no vaccines, the average parent, knows more about the products than the average pediatrician, in my experience.
You talk about this in your book. I mean, I think you're exactly right.
It's just true. Yeah. So, anyways, I said to him, you can't treat these. Think how you treat these folks. So anyway, that's what drives, I think, a lot of this work.
Well, right, and so you talk about this in your book. I don't want to go to the end, but I'm going to go to the end just briefly. I don't want to give it away because the book is very, very good. It's very well researched. You've been on the titular head of this issue for years through the COVID-19, craziness and all the government restrictions and the mandates and all that sort of thing. But you get to the end of the book, and I thought it was really fascinating about you have to think for yourself. And the people that think for themselves are really breaking out of what because the premise of your book is this coalition of true believers, right? The people that believe in vaccines all the time, and that you compare it to religion. We'll get to that in a second. I think it's very astute. But you say, use the brain. And I was reading a book recently, it's Napoleon Hill's book, Outwitting the Devil. And it's an interview he gives with the devil. And he asked the devil says, look, I own 98% of everybody. And he said the only way they break free is if they think for themselves. And I thought it was pretty interesting. And I think that, in a similar manner, the people you're talking about, through experience, through, a vaccine injury, have decided to do some research and look at this. And it seems as if those things have piled up, in the last, I don't know, 2-3 dozen years. There's been a lot of vaccine, what we call skepticism. And that number, I think, was probably 20%, 5 years ago. Now it's closer to 50 or plus percent higher. So let's talk about the amen corner of vaccines. Kind of how do you tell people how you describe this and why you liken it to a religion?
Sure. But if I could just respond to the first point, because I think you make a really good point, which is you do need to research these products. And I'll tell you why I call it a religion. Because, and most people will say, but I'm so busy. I can't research every product. I can't get into the detail of the stroller I pick or the car seat I pick or the car I buy for my kid. Like, am I going to really, really look that deeply into the product? And the truth is, for most products, you don't need to be as concerned with vaccines because the market will eventually correct for significant issues, right? It's not perfect. It's not a perfect correction, but when a car's like gas tank's blowing up, they can be held accountable. They correct that. When the airbags aren't working right, they correct that. When the frame is not, it doesn't crush properly, they'll correct. And that happens over time because they can be held financially accountable. And that's true of every other product in the market, except really for one, vaccines. Vaccines are the only product in America where you cannot sue to claim, had you made that product safer, my child will not be injured or killed. And that's because of a law passed in 1986. So for 40 years, you had an industry run amok. That is the reason why with vaccines, unlike other products, you really do have to do your own homework. The market's not going to correct to make them safer. Why do I call it a religion? Well, over 10 years of litigating around these products, and I went into this probably thinking what the average person thinks, like, I don't know, they say everybody would die without them, But over 10 years of hundreds of lawsuits, deposing world's leading vaccinologists, including the world's leading vaccinologist, and an endless amount of legal engagement with federal health agencies, state health agencies, and the supposed premier scientists in this area, what I found is that there is what they tell the public, there's what the public health, quote unquote, authorities tell you, and then there's what the reality is, what the primary sources show you, what they admit when their backs against a wall in a federal lawsuit, or they're forced to do so under oath when you're holding the evidence in their hand and they're staring at you and they have no choice. Those are two very, very different things. Often they contradict each other. They're often completely at odds. Often they're completely the opposite. And so I wrote the book to really draw out that differential. Here's what they tell you. Millions would die in America without without vaccines. And then here's the reality of what the data show, what they have had to admit, as an example. And I do that for transmission. I do that for pre-licensure safety. I do that for post-licensure safety. I do it in all the different areas that they, try to browbeat you into believing. And I call it a religion because the folks who push this stuff, they believe it's true. It's not based on evidence. They believe it. The difference is, in a religion, you're part of religion. You're engaged in trying to answer the unanswerable questions of life, like, where do we go when we die? These folks think they're being scientific, but they're not. they're really, it's beliefs that they're engaged in that they perpetuate to each other, just like a religion.
Yeah, you talk about, even from, the priests, right? The hierarchy, the structure from pharmaceutical firms, or the Stanley Plotkins, who's a high holy priest here. Um, I think it's very true. And it really, I was a Boy Scout leader. I have 3 kids who did scouts, and I remember the last few years they did it. It was during the COVID thing, and the Boy Scouts would meet outside with masks on. And I thought, good grief, you got to be kidding me, right? No, that's what they did, and we're in a very liberal town, and I say that because it seems like this vaccine, this religion of vaccines, is ideological from a big government perspective. I mean, people who are liberal or left of center, or what do you want to call it, Democrat, tend to be more. They believe this. They just empirically believe this. I remember a woman that pulled in, and she had like almost like when you get married, it says just married. Well, she said on the back of her, said, I got vaxxed and it feels so good. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. I mean, I've gotten vaccines too. I mean, I'm not anti-vax. I mean, we had some growing up or what have you. We've changed a little bit with knowledge as we learn things, but I wouldn't like wear it on a car. So it's just strange that it kind of seeps over into this cheerleading almost about a vaccine. It's just weird.
Well, that's the thing about belief, right? Because when you believe something, the way you get affirmation is with others believe it. So if you believe the others believe it, then you feel more confident in your belief. Because it's not like when you have something that's based on knowledge, it doesn't matter what others believe. You know it's true. There's a big delta there. So like the mask example, you want to wear masks? Great. No problem. Like if the Boy Scout, the parents of the kids who want them to wear masks outdoors by themselves when nobody's 100 feet even near them, fine. That's that's their parental choice in their instance. But to the kids who don't want to wear masks, here's the thing. If the kid is not wearing a mask, what happens? What do the parents often, a parent who wants their kid to mask is like, okay, yeah, they don't want to wear a mask. My kids wear a mask, fine. But then when they're like, no, you must wear a mask, and they get angry, they get upset about it. And why did you see anger and upset? Why? You know why? Because those who were supporting mask mandates, they couldn't do it based on intellect. They couldn't say, oh, here's the studies that support this practice. Here is the data that reflects that wearing these masks outdoors matters, makes a difference. They couldn't do that. So what do they draw from? It's a belief. So what do you do when you challenge it? They get emotional. That's where they get angry. They need you to wear a mask to affirm their belief because you are challenging that belief. That's really what's going on. And it's typically cut one way. The parents who didn't want to wear masks, I don't think they got upset about the kids that did wear masks for the most part. Maybe some. People are people, but it's on that. But by the way, on your point about anti-vaxxer, I just say one thing about that term. If you pull up Merriam-Webster and you look up the definition of anti-vaxxer, it means somebody that is opposed to getting one or more vaccines. I'm going to guess, Matt, that you are opposed to getting at least one, maybe COVID vaccine. Would you not get?
Never yet. No.
Yeah, okay, fine. So you're an anti-vaxxer. By the way, so is a majority of Americans, according to Merriam-Webster, are anti-vaxxers. The majority of Americans won't get COVID vaccine, and majority won't get a flu shot. Actually, most in a recent poll, and many of them don't want many other vaccines. So this term has been, has been used. They've gone so far with it, it now encompasses most Americans, ironically.
All right. So you're right. No, that's exactly right. Look, if you want, there are a lot of books out there published on the whole COVID thing from multiple perspectives. A lot of it's from the right. I'll call it the right for just lack of a better term, but maybe more of an individual liberty point of view, saying, hey, look, we were against it. Here's why. And here's what happened. And we were proven. Your book is really good. Because you're an attorney, you have lots of footnotes, almost like RFK in his book on the real Anthony Fauci. I think half the book is footnotes. But you have to, right? We have to be able to defend what we're saying.
I cite virtually every sentence specifically because I'm going to get attacked. So everything is cited with permalinks.
Yeah, you're going to get attacked. Yeah, exactly. And so so I would just recommend the book. I mean, if there is a book on it, I've read a bunch of them, and this one is, again, meticulously researched and backed up and factual.
But it's not just COVID vaccine, by the way. It's all childhood vaccines.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You're taking on the whole thing. But let me back up a minute. Let's go 30,000 foot. You are, look, fighting for people's individual liberty. You've got this ideological belief. Where did this come from, Aaron? Like, who are your heroes? What? I mean, you don't just, like I said, I think most of the country are not really thinking for themselves about these kinds of things. How did you get here on that point? But even before going to law, maybe.
My dad had a giant American flag flying in front of our house. You probably didn't find somebody who's more patriotic than my father, who, would constantly try to, he would just talk about how incredible the freedoms and the exist in this country, the ability to, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And it's not perfect. There's no perfect system. But that if you want to get ahead, you can, and my dad actually is a shining example of that in his own life. And so, he instilled with me very early, a deep abiding appreciation for the rights that we have in this country. And I mean, that definitely carried through. My dad was the one who pushed me to go to law school too. And so, 98% of, I read somewhere once, I've never confirmed this, like 98% of people who apply to law school talk about wanting to do some kind of social or civil rights or justice work, and something like 98% go into corporate law after they graduate. Like it's like invert or something like that. I don't know. I don't know if those statistics are accurate. Somebody should look them up. But the article's thrust was around that. It's inverted. It's like 90 saying they want to do that, but only 10% do it or something like, I don't know. In any event, I don't recall making those claims in my law school application, by the way, but I did, talk about, because I was definitely more, leaning towards freedoms, individual and civil rights, which I think also meant something very different when I went to law school, going back. And when I started law school now, 25 years ago at Berkeley, who are the ones who really, fighting for freedom of speech, for example? It was the ACLU with Democratic lawyers going in before Democratic judges. And, I mean, the classic example I grew up with was the Skokie decision, right? Where the Supreme Court said, yes, affirm the right of neo-Nazis to walk through a Jewish town in Illinois, because protecting their rights, no matter how horrible or despicable you thought what they said was, by protecting their rights, protect all our rights. That was the ethos I grew up with. That is the idea of freedom, civil individual rights. Government is a necessary evil, basically. You want as little of it as possible in your life, but you got to have some. And so could you imagine the ACLU today doing that case? Of course not. Can you imagine the Democrat, unfortunately supporting that through the different chains? The current... Sadly, no. In fact, the ACLU probably would have been the other side. The ACLU of today would probably fight to restrict the speech of those neo-Nazis. It would do exactly the opposite. There has been this giant shift, and now ironically, it's many of the conservative groups that have picked up the mantle of really fighting today for these civil individual rights. It's they really have picked up the mantle to do it. It's a strange shift from when I was in Berkeley.
Strange shift. And I think RFK, one of his books he wrote, RFK Jr., was open letter to a Democrat or something to that effect, open letter to liberals. And you read the book, you're like, wow, okay. And he's citing that, right? We used to be the party that did these things, and we're now the party that does these other things. And he's kind of working through it. So your dad's a hero. That's great. I mean, I think that's very encouraging to hear that. And and you listened to your father, who said, go to law school. He saw something in you and said, go down this road, son. And you did that. So I want to go also kind of about Aaron Siri. What books are you reading, Aaron? What's on your nightstand, or do you even have time to read?
I do have a few books there. So I typically read books by individuals who I think are taking a position that might be contrary to the ones I'm taking. The vaccine books I read, for example, I don't read vaccine books where folks are taking issue with vaccines. I read the vaccine books where people are supporting vaccines. I read the medical textbooks. I read the vaccinology textbooks, the immunology textbooks, the infectious disease, and the proponents of the products, as an example. So, I'm reading a book right now, actually, by Yuval Harari called *Sapiens*, and I've heard a lot of things that he has said publicly that I could not disagree more with. I mean, I could not disagree more with some of the things he says, but he's written this book that is widely read by many individuals who I would view as those who are trying to take away our civil rights, not just nationally, but internationally, and as well as in other countries. He's like the World Economic Forum. He's kind of in some ways like a thought leader there, or even the intellectual that they often look to. And so, so I'm reading his book because that's what they're reading. That's what Carl Schwab is reading. That's what the folks who are trying to create systems that, in my view, will incredibly infringements on your civil individual rights. And so what is it that they read? How are they thinking? And, some of the book is actually, it's amazing because some of it you're like, wow, that's so intelligent. And some of it you're like, my God, that's so soulless. Because he's obviously very smart. I mean, he's very, very smart. And so, anyway, that's a book that I've currently, but I probably have a bunch of other books that I'm interlacing, but I don't read that much. But I do try every night, instead of watching TV, oftentimes I'll just try to read.
Yeah. Well, that's a good. I think it's a good habit. You have to. I mean, in your business, I imagine you have to, and I think it's great that you're looking at the other side. I think that's a very instructive thing that you're doing. Right? Rules for Radicals is a book. Saul Alinsky wrote that. And you can kind of see what the other side's doing. There's another book along those lines. If it comes to me, I'll think of it. It's about a former communist, and he shares all the tactics of what they used to do. And he says, we've got a lot more people who are not communists than communists, but they seem to rule the world, right? They're this small, motivated minority that is able to shift public opinion, drive culture, drive the narrative. And, it reminds me, really, going back to the COVID thing, it's sort of what happened, right? You have this minority, I would say that the government, which is a minority generally, that is telling private businesses to do certain things, Google, YouTube to censor certain things, and schools and hospitals to force vaccinations, this sort of thing. We came real close to, and maybe we were there, almost a totalitarian type system. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, the censorship industrial complex, it's been called. This is, the military was driving a lot of this. What kind of, when you sit back and look at this now in retrospect, and even the bubblings percolating about some other, crises that are coming down the line that are looking for, what's your kind of thought? What was going on? What's going on here?
I could tell you the part of it that I found the most concerning, which is that I think at its core, what makes the United States of America unique, what makes it a shining example, it's, as we always, you'll hear often by politicians, is the respect for civil individual rights. It is that unlike every other government pretty much that preceded the United States of America, the idea was we are all born with inalienable rights, and we're going to respect those rights, and that we're going to, make the individual primary, and we're only going to cede rights to the government when really necessary, and we're going to enshrine that in a Bill of Rights even. And what is the Bill of Rights? It's a restriction on government. That's what it is. Like my kids say to me, well, I got freedom of speech. And I'm like, no, you don't in this house. I'm not the government. This is a parentocracy. There's no freedom of speech in the house. I'm not the government, right? So what's the freedom of speech? It is that the government can't restrict your rights. That's the whole idea. And so I think over the last, 200 plus years that we've been a nation.
We're 250 this year.
We have continuously aspired towards, I think, that ethos. Not perfect to start, to be sure. Again, humans aren't perfect. No system's perfect. But we have been on the right trajectory, I think, over time. Obviously, when we started, not everybody had rights even. not women eventually got the right to vote, right? But we've aspired towards that. Even when we amended the Constitution, it was toward that goal. And then, Skokie is another example of it. the decision we talked about. And I feel what the part of it that the most troubling to me is that I think we took a turn, not everybody, I would say half this country took a turn during COVID in which they lost the appreciation for why Skokie would be decided the way it is, why individual and civil rights are so important, and instead moved towards this notion of collectivism, whereby the idea is no. We have to give up our individual civil rights for the greater good, okay? And who's going to decide that? It's always the government. Who else is going to decide it? And once you cede those rights, you're not getting it back. That's ethos, okay? That ethos, while you're like, oh, that sounds such a good idea. We tried it. It's called communism in its extreme form. Now, I'm not saying that's what these folks are espousing. I mean, that's in extreme form. And then it has different iterations of it. And we have found through trial and error, when you look across the world, that those forms of government don't work out so well for their population. The form of government that has the greatest respect for civil and individual rights is also has proven to be, in this country, the one that is most likely to actually create an environment that guarantees more rights than any other government and assures more prosperity for individuals as well. So that was the thing that was scary to me. When they said, okay, everybody stay at home, I thought there was going to be massive protests. And I was just shocked when everybody was like, not only complying, but clamoring for it. Clamoring, people give you a hard time if you didn't wear a mask. People give you a hard time if, those things were the most troubling. And the lingering effects, I would say, on one side of the political spectrum from that are very concerning, because they have continued to maintain this notion of, no, you just got to give up all your rights. And the government knows best. Yeah, not a good idea.
Yeah. Here we are in 2026. We are at our 250th anniversary this year, and we lurch forward. And there are, so many people out there talking about, the dollar's going to collapse. They got, you got all this disparity kind of gospel stuff. And you got the people that are, the American exceptionalism. Kind of where do you fall? What's your hunch if you were to be put on your prophet hat, Aaron, and look down the road 10 years? What do you see, particularly? Let's use the vaccine, because that's your work. What happens? What's going to happen? More coercion? We get rid of the 1986 rule? What do you think? What's your sense?
I would say that if over the next 10 years, we do not reverse course in terms of the regulatory state, in terms of increasing our national deficit, then we're going to see decline of the American, let's call it, empire, so to speak, okay? Because if you look through history, let's learn from it, those types, the direction that we're taking in that regard is often what has brought nations to their knees and has, put them on the wrong footing in terms of, okay, so we've got to get those things under control, all right? We're 38 trillion in debt, and we bring in 5 trillion in revenue. That's not every year, and we're spending 6-7 trillion on our ballparks. That's not sustainable. You can't run a business like that. Who's going to invest in you as a business? Nobody. And so much of our dollars held in national reserve currencies around the world. That's what helps prop up our dollar, among other factors. That's why you get to afford the standard of living you have. You like that. You can buy goods pretty cheap here, in part because so many countries are holding our money as their national reserve, among other factors. Well, what happens once we get too far in debt? What's going to happen is they're going to be like, ooh, maybe we should start diversifying away from the dollar, maybe hold more euro, more franc, more digital currency. That's going to cause a problem. In fact, if they all did it overnight, we could be in a death spiral, right? Very scary. If we continue to create shackles upon shackles upon shackles and doing anything in this country economically, which is what every layer of regulation and law pass has. I'm not saying there's no place for laws and regulation. Don't get me wrong. There absolutely are. But most regulations, in my opinion, are no longer being passed to help you, Matt, or me, or any individuals. They're there because who's got the time, inclination to actually influence these regulatory agencies to pass regulations? It's the very people that are supposed to regulate. Every year, Congress passes around 200 laws, but thousands of regulations that have the same effect as laws passed by Congress are passed by these federal regulatory agencies. Don't get me started on the state level, okay? And who's writing them? Who's promoting them? Who's pushing them? Often the very industry. And those are, let me tell you, those are not meant to help us or help the economy. They're to protect the racket of whatever those industries are doing. That's the problem. A racket's too strong a term. It's helped to create corporate favoritism for the existing industries that reduces competition. It increases barriers to entry. It creates anti-competitive conduct that not only hurts us at home and hurts us abroad. And it's very, very troubling. So I have a longer list of that, but I'm going to stop with those two. Okay, of problems that we face as a country.
Right. I mean, you've touched on the unelected, unaccountable administrative state, which is what Elon Musk tried to get at, right? When he did his task force on shrinking the government or whatever it was, I forget, remember, but
Doge,
that's it, right, and so I don't know that it was successful. I mean, I think it was a good at least start, but
it could have been if Trump let him do it.
Yeah, which is begs lots of other questions, right? I mean,
and let's just be blunt about it. I'll be honest about it. I remember when I was in Mar-a-Lago during the transition right after Trump won. Elon was walking around with this kid on his shoulder all the time with President-elect Trump at that time. So much hope. And those guys were like inseparable, and there were a lot of amazing initiatives. One simple one. Our budget, 1 trillion of our entire budget, so I'm like a 6/7 of it is just CMS, Medicare, Medicaid, and a few other programs. Okay, the amount of waste, fraud, and abuse is incredible. If you'd have actually properly done, what needed to be done to root that out, you probably could have trimmed the budget, I'm going to guess, by hundreds of billions. You're seeing a little bit about that now, and they're doing it in Minnesota. But this is the drop in the bucket. They should have done it at the AI Elon Musk scale of let's do computer learning. They could have, matched up, like they should compare tax filings with people who are getting certain benefits. Match them up. Are they really appropriate? They could have matched up business tax filings with various CMS, Medicaid, Medicare. They could have done that. Doge wanted to do that. They could have rooted out all that tons of corruptions overnight. Did it happen? As far as I know, it never happened. It's a problem. That's a problem.
It is. I mean, I feel like in our work, it's almost like the leaky boat there, or whack-a-mole or something that pops up and we have another issue, and I feel like we're a state that's way over leveraged. I mean, we're way out over our skis here, and we're just still flying through the air. And there's a forest below us, and we may dodge it, we may get around it, but to your point on the debt thing, that's very concerning. I mean, you see the debt clock where it just spirals around, and millions of dollars.
It's an existential issue for our country.
Yeah, right. And how do you get around that?
You have elected representatives who actually care about the country more than they do the next pork project in their district. That would be one very important place to start. We should gut the regulatory state for the most part. Most of it's just in itself waste, fraud, and abuse. Meaning most of the federal government is waste, fraud, and abuse by its very existence. Anyways, I'll stop there.
No, I like this. You sound like you may be stumping for a higher office, Aaron. Is there a political future? No political future for you. Okay.
No, I sue the government. I try to hold the government accountable. If I were in government, I would fire myself because I want less government. So if I was running an agency, I probably, from most agencies that I can think of, I'd probably just let almost everybody go and then myself go. And that would probably have accomplished what would be the right thing to do. I mean, yeah.
Now, spoken like a true limited government advocate, right? I mean, we've worked with a lot of organizations over the years, mostly, right of center. And the hope is once you accomplish your mission, you close your doors and you go home. And that really hadn't happened, right? You have a new mission, you recreate your mission or what have you. And I've seen that happen even on our side too, right? We have bidders, their jobs, their salaries, their donors, and it just self-perpetuates. So we had this bureaucracy that not only does this regulation and it's unaccountable and they're unelected, but it's also weaponized. It even targets people. we started the show talking about this. If you're a certain community or demographic or what have you, it would, in most cases, you can't do that if it's based on race or sex or sexual preference, whatever. But on vaccines, the turret turned and just started, machine gunning. And this weaponized bureaucracy. We've occasionally seen it with the IRS. Certain presidents like Nixon or whatever has a hit list, or maybe Trump has a hit list for people he wants to talk. How do you rein? Is it even possible to rein that in? Does that come from the top? Is that the president that has to do this? What?
I guess, there's two different things. It depends what we're talking about. So if we're talking about the 2.8 million career federal employees, okay, they quote unquote weaponize the government, in my view, oftentimes to basically maintain their positions, power, funding, budget. So it's not weaponized, it's weaponized, but not in the way that traditionally thought of, which is, I'm going to target Matt Waters. It's hurting you, but it's hurting you because their goal is to just maintain to their own continuity and increase their budget and increase who they are, and so you create this blob that just wants to keep going. That itself is a form of weaponization. It's what they call the deep state often. It's really just career employees who don't want to who want to maintain, what they've got and don't want to comply with what the politicals who were just elected in want them to do or otherwise.
They'll outlive them. Yeah, outlive them. Right.
Then there is some weaponization that does happen on the political level oftentimes, like targeting folks who don't agree with and for criminal prosecution. And that stuff shouldn't happen. I don't care what side you're on, because that's how we become a banana republic. Okay, yes, we are a nation of laws, and we should abide by the laws. Anybody, though, who has taken a good look at our federal criminal code, let me tell you something. I think everybody in this country is probably committing felonies all the time. They just don't know it. So many statutes on the criminal code, and those need to be fixed too, by the way. It shouldn't be that way. They're so broad. They're so frankly ridiculous when you read them, because I've had to advise on some of these statutory codes over the years. It's like anything could fall into it almost. They're wildly broad. And so, if you really, 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 really want to get somebody, you could probably get them, which is why prosecutors exercise prosecutorial discretion and why it's so important. Because a lot of people, when you look at it, they're like, come on, it doesn't fit in this. It fits in the letter of the law, but it's not, it's not the intent. It's not what we're really trying to. And when you start using the letter of the law and not the intent of the law, not the normal precedent, not the normal expectation to go after other people, you become a banana republic. And that's dangerous. It's dangerous no matter who does it. Nobody should do it. Somebody who really commits a crime, that's fine. But when it's weaponized, and we've seen it, that's really bad. It's bad for us as a country, period.
Yeah, I think we're safe to say that I think Trump has probably done that on a few occasions. It seems to me, and again, but I voted for the guy, just put it out there. It seems to me that he's used this in ways, and the court has seemed to throw it out. I don't know whether it's fair or not, but we've seen it, of course, with Biden. Biden did it as well. He targeted an organization you and I are working for by sending people in to take them down and end accounts and tell payment processors, tell donors you can't send money to this organization. That got real personal.
And what is all of that? That's an infringement of your civil individual rights. It all comes down to lack of respect for civil individual rights, everything you just described.
How do we get that individual rights, the scientific inquiry, with our topic, with vaccines? You talk about, look, there's false advertising. There's labels in vaccine packages that you've pointed out that don't show whether this thing is safe or not. In fact, by not showing that, it tells you maybe how unsafe they are, right? There's testing with babies, and they've only done it's a small 4 or 5 day test. We don't know what happens after that. So there's a legal system, and there's a research system. The legal system is protecting those. It's not protecting my individual liberties in this case. It's actually protecting those who are hurting me, right? As A. Then you got the other side. You've got this, research that is also protecting the manufacturers. Fake research. How do we get back to the scientific method inquiry?
Super simple solution. I mean this, and I mean it. And my book, I think, more than supports this. You get government out of the business of vaccines, and it will self-correct, and that includes the immunity provided to industry under the 86 Act. Get government out of it. Let vaccines rise and fall on their own merits, like cars, like pens, like boats, like planes, like knives, like every other product on the market. Okay, like drugs.
They're accountable,
but not just accountable. But they don't have the incredible conflict that having government involved brings with it. Let's put it this way, okay? How are you going to fix it? So the current business model for vaccines is, well, who's the market? You don't have to worry if you're the company selling it because it's mandated. Oh, okay, great. What's the marketing plan? Don't worry, government does it for you. Okay. What about injuries, suits, getting sued for harms? Don't worry, you got immunity. What about payment? How do we assure it? Don't worry, government guarantees payment. What a business model. Think about it. Who the hell wouldn't go into that business? That's ridiculous. So how do you fix it? Get government out of all of that. Get rid of mandates. Get rid of the government promoting it. Now they got to persuade you on the merits. Now they got to do it the way they sell every other product. Persuade you. They don't have enough. They make $100 billion in sales. They don't have enough to persuade you on it. Come on, that's ridiculous. And think about it, with the billions more that the government spends to persuade you, you still can't get people to take it. Millions don't want your product. Let me tell you, it's not the anti-vax groups with their few little measly millions of dollars. It's because your product's causing issues. The problem with your product. Anyway, lift the immunity to liability so they can be held accountable, and stop paying them. Let consumers have to pay, or at least insurance companies. Okay, you fix that. Let me tell you, we'll all change very quickly. The FDA will probably start actually doing its job instead of being a pom-pom cheerleader for vaccines. Because it will actually, and the drug companies will actually want to properly trial these products, because now they're on the hook. So they're not going to do these baloney, ridiculous clinical trials. They're going to do it like they do it for drugs, multi-year placebo-controlled trials, because they want to know it's safe. Then they're going to send real data to the FDA. The FDA might actually start doing its job because it's no longer has the conflicts of interest that it has. I also don't think FDA licensure should be exclusive, by the way, but that's a separate story. They should be, you can get an FDA license, but you should also be able to sell the product if you want. Break that monopoly government has on these products. Then the CDC, at that point, can make its recommendations. It's no longer in the mandate business, which it really isn't, even though it pretends it's not. Great, now it's got to persuade you on the merits too. The doctor's got to persuade you on the merits because you have a real choice. So now they got to engage in real informed consent, and they can be held liable for harm. So now they're actually going to give a crap about who they're hurting. Same with the pharma companies, and the whole thing will correct itself. So get government out of it, and it will self-correct very quickly.
Yeah, and Aaron, thoughts on that? I mean, the 1986 law will be a start, right? I mean, you'd advocate eliminating that?
If you could. I highly doubt that's possible because of over 1,000 pharma lobbyists and no vaccine safety lobbyists that I'm aware of, pharma medical industry lobbyists. And so, it's going to be unlikely it will ever get repealed unless there is some incredible public outcry. Like, for example, I don't know, what was that Rasmussen poll said? How many Americans said they knew somebody that died of COVID vaccine? They knew somebody or knew somebody. Was it 1 in 4?
It was a big number. Yeah, maybe 1 in 4, 25%. Yeah.
1 in 4 Americans. So apparently that's not good enough. So we need something more catastrophic, something incredibly, because that's often what drives legislation. So either something catastrophic will have to happen to drive that, or there is another way to lift the immunity. And once you understand this, you'll also understand why one of the things that happened at HHS have happened at HHS over the last 2 years, last year, which is that if you make the vaccine no longer routinely recommended and you take it off the vaccine table, it loses its immunity, even though the 86 Act's in place, because those are prerequisites. So when Secretary Kennedy, when Bobby took a bunch of vaccines and made them no longer routine, the next step, if he'd taken them off the table, there would have been no argument there's no longer covered. And that's part of, I think, why industry freaked out so bad.
Yeah, very, very interesting. That's really insightful. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I see that putting this out into the marketplace where it's, like Car and Driver magazine rates cars every year, and they say which ones are good and which ones are bad. You just don't have that in this marketplace, and the people that should be.
You got my book.
Well, yeah, but the people that should be doing it.
That's like a Consumer Reports, kind of what I wrote for in some ways.
Yeah, but exactly. Right. But I mean, the people that should be doing it, right? Nature magazine or whatever, they're not doing it. And we now know through the Fauci stuff, they not only did they not do it, they covered up those who were doing it.
Well, who they receive money from pharmaceutical companies, every one of these journals. And then who's the who are the reviewers? Who are the editors? They're often individuals who are also indirectly or indirectly receiving pharma money. And then separately, there's a religion around these products where really a lot of people have this construct. I'm not that. I'm not X. I'm not against vaccines, right? And they almost define their themselves in that way, their self-schema. So to take issue with vaccines creates incredible cognitive dissonance for them vis-a-vis their own self-schema as well. So you got so many powerful forces all pushing against journals ever publishing. Look what they just did. They just basically took 4 articles that showed vaccines cause harms, and they're going to pull them or take issue with them. Why? I got an email from a Guardian reporter saying you use these in your ACIP presentation and in your book. You're gonna make a correction now. So I mean, what was the impetus? The impetus people were using the actual science and data. The study's been on book for 20 years. So any event.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, 100%. This whole thing, I think what we're doing, what you're doing in your book, it's penetrating deep down into the grassroots where the bureaucracy is doing one thing, pharma and politicians, but the people on the ground have caught fire. Said, you know what? I'm going to take a second. I'm going to take a second look at that. I'm going to reconsider what I've always been told about that. Their mistakes have led to this grassroots fire of people saying, you call us skeptics, call us whatever, but we're not doing it anymore, right?
Injuring millions of people and then gaslighting them with ad hominem, casting them to the side, mistreating them is what has created this.
Right. And dismissive parents. And I mean, all these injuries we know about.
You know what, Matt? I got a great idea. Listen, I'm going to start a anti-notepad movement. And I'm going to get millions of people to oppose notepads. And how am I going to do that? By telling them notepads cause harms and injuries and issues and blah, blah, blah. How many people do you think are going to come along with that? Nobody. It's stupid. People are not turning their lives upside down, moving states, taking their kids to doctors over and over again, trying to heal them, trying to heal themselves, stopping to vaccinate their younger children, nieces and nephews no longer vaccinated because they saw what happened to, it's just reality. They just want to ignore it. Eventually it will break. It'll break under its own weight at some point.
Yeah, that's where I was going. I think that the we the people part, this individual liberty part, right? I remember walking in Washington, D.C., there was a big rally, and RFK spoke at it. And on the stage, Aaron, there was, rabbis and Nation of Islam and Christians and atheists. They're all holding hands together singing Kumbaya. And I thought, wow, what a moment. Talk about unifying people. And they set aside all these other differences they have, political, theological, whatever. And they said, hey, we agree on this. This is not good. And we can't be told to do this. And there was that spirit of America that we do see bubbling up here and there. And certainly, I don't know what the injury count is or the death count. I've seen all kind of numbers on COVID, and then you have you had the Senate committee hearing a few weeks ago on the cancer stuff happening. The people, I think, sort of got it. And you're right. If it's 1 in 4 in the Pew poll, they know someone who died or was affected negatively. That's going to hurt your business model.
I think it was Rasmussen, but yeah, it's going to hurt your business, which is why what do governments throughout history have to do when they can't persuade you on the merits? They can't say, hey, this product's good for you, take it. And you say, you say no. First, they engage in a little coercion, then more coercion, then mandates, then censorship, go down the road of tyranny. I mean, that's what they're doing because they can't get people to do it on the merits. They don't have to mandate you to drink water. You're going to drink water. You're going to eat, you're going to eat, breathe air. And that's what they say. These things are like breathing air, drinking water. They're just super healthy for you. You should take them, period. They shouldn't have to take away your rights to get there.
Well, the amazing, I think maybe the silver lining is they've lost the narrative, and I don't think they get it back easily, in my opinion. I think it's kind of gone, and they're still losing it, and there's still repercussions. I mean, that ripple effect is still going out. I mean, again, the Senate hearing just a few weeks ago, and the books are being published, and the studies are coming out, and it's like there's just not a lot of good news on that front, and it just continues to be revealed that this is bad, this happened, and this happened.
Well, the good news is that 10 years ago, or when we started doing this medical liberty work, there was no party, there was no news outlet, there were no politicians and no real judges for the most part that would even entertain some of these concerns, where now there's at least one party and about half the country is receptive to it. So I think we've come a long way.
Yeah, we have. Well, on that note, we'll end it there. Aaron, Siri, thank you for hopping on, and we'll give you all the resources on this thing. And we're just blessed to have you on our team, because I'd hate to be on the other side of you, receiving your letters, asking for disclosure. And I'm just thankful for your work and your book too. Great book. Very good book. I actually have it on Audible as well, and you read it. Very good.
Yeah, I did.
Congratulations. All right, very good, my friend. Thanks for hopping on. We'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Take care.
Against the Current podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.